and when her touch made my heart bloom. The coffee shop was supposed to be my sanctuary, not the place where my carefully constructed walls would crumble. I had spent 3 years building those walls, brick by careful brick. After my family's rejection left me hollow and afraid. 3 years of convincing myself that love wasn't meant for someone like me. That the ache in my chest whenever I saw two women holding hands was something I needed to learn to ignore. But then Maya walked through that door on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, and suddenly every defense I had constructed felt as fragile as paper in a storm. She didn't notice me at first. Why would she? I was just another face behind the counter, another barista taking orders and steaming milk and pretending that the routine of my days didn't feel like slowly drowning. Maya shook the rain from her dark hair, droplets catching the light like scattered diamonds, and when she smiled at me while ordering her vanilla latte, something ancient and sleeping inside me began to stir. Her eyes were the warmest brown I had ever seen, holding depths of kindness that made my throat tight. I barely managed to write her name on the cup without my hands trembling. She came back the next day, and the day after that. Each time we exchanged a few more words, her voice soft and melodic, telling me about the graphic design project she was working on, asking me about the book I kept tucked beneath the counter for slow moments. I learned that she had moved to the city 6 months ago, that she loved old bookstores and rainy days, that she had a laugh that sounded like wind chimes on a summer evening, and with each conversation, each shared smile, I felt myself falling into something terrifying and beautiful that I had promised myself I would never feel again. The problem was that I knew better than to hope. My parents had made their stance clear when I was 21 and foolish enough to believe honesty would be met with understanding. The night I told them I was gay, my mother's face had gone pale as frost. My father's hands had clenched into fists on the dinner table, and the words they spoke afterward became knives that I still carried embedded in my chest. Disgusting, unnatural, not our daughter anymore. I left their house that night and never went back, carrying only a suitcase and a heart so shattered I wasn't sure it would ever beat properly again. So I kept my distance from Maya, even as every fiber of my being wanted to move closer. I kept our conversations light and safe, even when her eyes lingered on mine a moment too long, even when her fingers brushed against my hand while taking her coffee and electricity raced up my arm. I had learned that wanting something didn't mean you were allowed to have it, and I had learned that love, for someone like me, came with a price I wasn't willing to pay again. But Maya was patient in a way that undid me. She started staying longer at the coffee shop, settling into the corner table with her laptop, occasionally glancing up to catch my eye and smile. She began bringing me little things, a bookmark she found at an antique store, a funny comic strip she thought I would appreciate, once a small succulent plant. Because she noticed the windowsill behind the counter looked lonely, each gift felt like a question I was too afraid to answer, a door she was gently holding open while I stood frozen on the threshold. The shift happened on a Thursday evening, 2 months after we first met. The shop was empty except for us, rain drumming against the windows in a steady rhythm that made the world outside feel distant and dreamlike. Maya was still at her usual table, but she had closed her laptop and was simply watching me as I wiped down the counter, her expression thoughtful and tender in a way that made my heart hammer against my ribs. She stood up, walked over to the counter, and the space between us suddenly felt charged with all the words we hadn't spoken. Maya's voice was barely above a whisper when she said my name, and there was something in the way she said it, like a prayer, like a promise, that made tears spring to my eyes before I could stop them. I tried to turn away to hide the emotion threatening to spill over, but Maya reached across the counter and caught my hand in hers. Her touch was warm and certain, her fingers interlacing with mine like they had always belonged there, and I felt something inside me crack wide open. All the loneliness I had been carrying, all the fear and shame and desperate longing, came rushing to the surface like a wave I could no longer hold back. I told her everything. The words tumbled out in a broken stream, about my family, about the rejection that had taught me to make myself small and invisible, about the 3 years I had spent convincing myself that being alone was safer than risking that kind of pain again. I told her that I was terrified of what I felt when I looked at her, that every time she smiled at me, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, that I didn't know how to want something this much without being afraid of losing it. Maya listened to every word, her thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of my hand, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finally fell silent, exhausted and exposed, she came around the counter and pulled me into her arms. The hug was everything I hadn't known I needed, firm and safe and infinitely tender. I buried my face in her shoulder and let myself cry for the first time in 3 years. Let myself feel all the grief and loneliness I had been pushing down. And Maya held me through all of it without flinching. When I finally pulled back, embarrassed and raw, Maya cupped my face in her hands with a gentleness that made me want to cry all over again. She told me that she had known from the first day, that she had felt the connection between us like a live wire, that she had been waiting for me to be ready, that she would keep waiting as long as I needed. She told me that her own journey to accepting herself had been painful and long, that she understood fear, but that she also knew that love, real love, was worth the risk of heartbreak. She kissed me then, soft and questioning, and I felt my whole world tilt on its axis. Her lips were gentle against mine, tasting of vanilla and rain and possibility, and for the first time in 3 years I let myself hope. The kiss was everything I had been afraid to, want, tender and passionate and right in a way that made my soul ache with recognition. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard, Maya pressed her forehead against mine and whispered that she had been waiting her whole life to find someone who made her feel the way I did. The weeks that followed were a slow unfurling. Like a flower learning to bloom again after a long winter, Maya was patient with my fears, never pushing, always present. She held my hand in public even when I tensed, whispering reassurances that we were allowed to be happy, that our love wasn't something to hide. She stayed on the phone with me through panic attacks when old wounds reopened, her voice steady and sure, reminding me that I was worthy of love, that what my family couldn't see didn't diminish my value. She introduced me to her friends, a warm and welcoming group who embraced me without question, and for the first time I understood what it meant to have a chosen family. I met her parents over dinner one Sunday, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my fork, and when her mother pulled me aside afterward to tell me how happy I made her daughter, how grateful she was that Maya had found someone who looked at her with such love, I excused myself to the bathroom and cried with relief. Maya taught me that healing wasn't linear, that there would be hard days when the old fears came rushing back, when I would want to retreat behind my walls again, but she also showed me that love could be a safe place to land, that vulnerability wasn't weakness but the bravest thing a person could offer. She held me through the nightmares, celebrated the small victories, and slowly, carefully, helped me believe that I deserved the happiness we were building together. 6 months after that rainy Tuesday when she first walked into the coffee shop, Maya and I moved into a small apartment, with large windows that let in streams of golden light. We painted the walls together, hung artwork, filled the space with plants and books and laughter. I learned what it meant to wake up next to someone who loved me wholly, to share morning coffee and evening conversations, to build a life with hands that reached for each other in the dark. My heart, which had felt so broken and beyond repair, began to bloom under Maya's tender care. The ache that had lived in my chest for 3 years transformed into something else. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of joy alongside it. I learned that healing didn't mean forgetting the hurt, but making room for new experiences that were stronger and more beautiful than the old wounds. Standing in our kitchen one Sunday morning, watching Maya make pancakes while humming off-key to the radio, I felt overwhelmed by gratitude. Gratitude for her patience, for her love, for the way she had seen past my walls to the scared, lonely person underneath and had chosen to stay anyway. Gratitude for my own courage in letting her in choosing hope over fear, in believing that I deserved the love she offered so freely. If this story touched something in your heart, if you've ever felt the fear of being yourself or the courage it takes to love openly, I gently ask you to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that. Their love is valid and beautiful. Your support means the world and helps stories like this reach those who need them most. The journey wasn't over. I knew there would still be hard days, moments when old fears resurfaced, times when the world outside our safe haven felt hostile and unwelcoming. But I also knew that I wasn't facing those challenges alone anymore. I had Maya's hand in mine, her steady presence reminding me that love wasn't something to be ashamed of but something to celebrate. I had a chosen family who supported us, a community that understood, a home that was built on acceptance and joy. Before we reach the end of this journey together, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below sharing one word that describes how this story made you feel, or telling me about your own journey toward finding love and acceptance. Your stories matter, and this community is here for you. Maya caught me watching her and grinned, spatula in hand. Flour somehow dusted across her cheek. She crossed the kitchen and kissed me, sweet and certain, and I felt my heart bloom even wider, making room for all the love and possibility that lay ahead. This was my life now, messy, and imperfect and more beautiful than anything I had dared to imagine during those 3 lonely years. This was the life I had been too afraid to dream of, the love I had convinced myself I didn't deserve. But I was learning, day by day, that I was worthy of every gentle touch, every whispered endearment, every moment of joy we created together. Maya's love was teaching me to be brave, to be open, to be whole again, and as sunlight streamed through our kitchen windows, warming our faces and making ordinary moments feel sacred, I finally understood that the greatest act of courage wasn't building walls to keep pain out. It was tearing those walls down and letting love bloom in the spaces where fear used to live.